Hey Amarillo, I'm Jason Boyette, and you're listening to Hey Amarillo, the interview podcast featuring some of the most interesting people and stories of Amarillo, Texas. This week's episode is sponsored by SKP Creative, and the team there asked me to talk about the Amarillo Tribune. Now, if you haven't heard, this is a new local journalism project where I'm a founding board member. The Amarillo Tribune is Amarillo's first community-supported, nonprofit, digital-only news organization. It's free public service journalism about Amarillo and this area. My friend Jackie Kingston is the CEO and executive editor, and she's built up a really strong news team for this daily publication. They provide local coverage about issues we care about. Now, I won't be writing for this publication. I'm just a board member. My job is the nonprofit side of things. We approve budgets and whatnot. But I'm excited about this project, and I hope you'll support it. So you can learn more by visiting AmarilloTribune.org. They're already publishing news items, the deep reporting they're doing about city council, city hall, education, all kinds of things. So go visit AmarilloTribune.org, sign up for its weekly email newsletter. That's AmarilloTribune.org, and thanks to SKP Creative for the support. As part of this podcast partnership with Brick and Elm Magazine, I want to give a podcast shout out to Opportunity School. The July-August issue of Brick and Elm is available now in print. It's also online at brickandelm.com, and we are finalizing the September-October issue right now. Today's guest is Chris Jackson. Chris is part of the planning department for the city of Amarillo. Now, officially, his title is Planner 2, which sounds a little boring. But his role is to serve as the city's neighborhood planner. He's a liaison with the organizations working to implement the neighborhood plans for North Heights, the Barrio, San Jacinto, and Eastridge. Now, these are older and underserved neighborhoods in Amarillo, and revitalizing them is central to the city's long-range planning efforts. So this means a lot of exciting, very visible projects, and some projects that are not quite as visible, but they're all important. And Chris is the guy tasked with moving these forward. So here's Chris Jackson. Chris Jackson, welcome to the Hey Amarillo podcast. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's actually a pleasure to be here on my end.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on my end. I've been paying attention to the work you've been doing for the city for the last couple of years, and so I'm honored to talk to you and hear a little bit more about that. I want to start with you the same way I start with all my guests, and that's to ask you why you're here. So what brought you to Amarillo in the first place?
So for me in Amarillo, I was just born and raised here. So I grew up in the community. The Panhandle is very interesting in itself compared to times that I've traveled outside of the Panhandle and seen the cultural differences. And by cultural differences, I mean, in my realm of public service, I've learned that there's some things that we do different as far as going above and beyond in some ways. And then there's some ways that like I've learned to bring from other cultures and bring that type of public service here. And I think, I guess where it could really all stem from is how I was actually thinking just a few seconds before the interview, like my speech and debate from high school. A lot of idealism in that, and then as a young kid, and then like that kind of nurturing me into really finding out where I want to be. So born and raised in Amarillo, but as far as what's pushed me towards public service is kind of a lot of impressions on me as a youth about what I believe public service is.
Okay. And, where'd you go to high school?
I went to Randall High School, actually. It's a funny story in my background is a lot of because I was in the foster care system for a little bit there. Okay. So my geography is very widespread, which is why I kind of have a lot of links to different parts of the city because I grew up in Hamlet. And then for the longest time, I'm growing up around people that I know went to PD. And then I got moved out to a different part of town whenever my grandmother died. But I ended up living with my foster parents. That was my cousin who ended up eventually adopting me. But we moved out towards Austin. So I went to Austin Middle School. So I grew up with a whole entire different subset of people that went to Tascosa.
Exactly, yeah. And
then right at the final year, I finished at Austin Middle School. But the sad thing is that a lot of the kids I grew up with then, They went on to Tesco's, and then we moved again, and I went out to Randall. So I had to start nearly from scratch.
Yeah.
I'll make friends at high school. And high school probably being the most impersonal years on what I do and stuff, but just a lot of people I knew from the past to now I still keep in contact with. But yeah.
Yeah, so I've heard a lot about kids who end up in foster care, that there are so many hurdles that they end up going through. A lot of it is moving around a lot like you did, but there's a lot of other stuff that just the statistics are so terrible about it. And so you've ended up in a place of success, you're contributing, you're working for the city. Like, how did you escape, a lot of those statistics? What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, so I would say that a lot of that has to do with perseverance, because there's two interesting things about the foster care system is that as much opportunity as it's kind of constructed that they try to make opportunities for foster kids, it is really just rolling the dice. There's a lot of influences. I was lucky enough to land into a home that I won't say was perfect, and I'm not here to trauma dump in my interview, but there's a lot of relationships, even with my foster parents, I'm not strong with to this day. I was just lucky enough that they were in a position for me to still pursue educational opportunities, especially they really focused on that intellectual drive that they knew or they saw in me. And so I built off of that. And then I did capitalize on a lot of the social programs that are offered to foster students. And the main one being education. One thing, if there's anything I will voice in this interview that maybe doesn't get taken advantage of enough by foster kids, is that tuition-free college in the state that you live in.
Right.
That put me, besides the race issues that I've had to deal with all my life, besides the wealth inequality issues I had to deal with all my life, a lot of things that turned around for me an opportunity was the single fact that as basically a child of the state, that I was able to pursue education. I still had to pay for books, still have to, but there's ways to make that easier, ways to work around that. There's still, if you don't have a place to live where that university is, then pursue my room and board. But going for grants rather than loans is a lot easier when you don't have tuition to pay for. So there's not a lot to pay. Grad school is a little bit different. They don't do grants for grad school, so it's doing my master's in public administration now. So even though I don't have tuition fees, there's still other fees that go along with having to take a loan. But massive advantage that I had. So I took advantage of some of the things that came along with being a foster kid. And it's also I'm a proponent of universal college and free college for everybody. Like, I'm not going to shake the system. I'm not going to be like, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. I went to college and I'm paying all my debts. I don't have many debts to begin with. And I actually haven't even had to start making any payments just yet. So for me, there's a lot of, it is very hard in the foster care system, especially if you don't somehow make it into a home, because some people are just stuck in a foster care facility or group housing, or someone who just may have multiple kids that they're not going to adopt, but there's just such an overflow of children. And as much as the foster care system, there's some good things about it, and it's definitely helped me, there's so much to improve there. So honestly, I could say that I did things to capitalize and make it, but I'm more of an anomaly in some sense, other than just being the standard rule, I would say. Since
you did take advantage of that that benefit and going to a state school with no tuition, what was your college like? Where'd you go?
Went to West Texas A&M University. And right now I'm getting my master's in public admin at Texas Tech, but virtually, because that's a long drive from here. And also
you have
a full-time job. You can't really go to night classes. There's no way I'd survive. Honestly, don't know, even with multiple part-time jobs in colleges, I don't know how I survived then going to class. But I went to West Texas A&M for my master's in political science, minor in English. I absolutely loved the experience there. I think it helped that, and this is going back to high school, at Randall, and a lot of speech and debate tournaments, and there was a lot of big tournaments that would happen at WT for speech and debate. So I kind of already knew the campus.
Yeah, you had exposure to
me. And then there's people there that I knew as well. And so I love WT. to this day.
Did you know you wanted to end up in city government, neighborhood planning, that sort of thing? Or were you just thinking a general, I want to get into public service in some way?
At first, it wasn't a public service, actually. And this actually has to do with some of my upbringing that kind of changed this is going to sound bad, after I got an education. But I actually grew up more conservative, and I wasn't really a big fan of the government at all. And I really wanted to be a lawyer or a constitutional lawyer. And then as I went to college, I went for political science. Debate kind of in high school kind of broadened my horizons already, because some people don't know this. You have to debate both sides of an argument.
Right.
And that's when my mind really blossomed, because religious beliefs or hard, staunch beliefs are completely different when you see the side of every argument.
And most people don't even want to think about that other side. And so by forcing you to,
And it's also not think about the other side. There are times where I had to argue. I had to support the other side and really dive into the facts of something that really opened my eyes, because it's competitive. So I'm not just passively agreeing. I am arguing this point. And that really drove home for me kind of the ideology that I have today in retrospect to a lot of things.
Okay.
So it had started with, I wanted to be a constitutional lawyer. Then as I progressed throughout my education, I got in TFAS, the Fund for American Studies, which is also kind of like a conservative scholarship. I didn't know that at the time, and this is when I was more like on the left side of politics and stuff. But went through this program to get an internship in Washington, D.C., fell in love with the city of Washington, D.C., and I will go back there one day. But I got to see how that atmosphere operated in a bigger city centered around politics, but also international cultures just all over the place. Where I interned at was the Antonin Scalia School of Law. Okay. And I was just a little research intern, nothing too important.
You weren't clerking for him or anything?
Yeah, like that, Yeah, as a little research intern. But I got to do other things while I was there. I got to go and meet different politicians. I have pictures of it, Robert F. Kennedy III, Dirk Durbin. Got to sit in on different hearings, and it really brought into my mind that I was like, well, I mean, I have a lot of lofty ideas and beliefs about what I want to see in this world in politics. So I should probably find ways to engage in my community. And so right after I had gotten back from the internship, that was in my junior year. So I was just coming in to the fall of my senior year, my final year of college. And I hit the ground running. I became a director of volunteers for Greg Sagan's campaign for Congress. Started getting involved in politics that way. I went and graduated. Then I went and worked at the Panhandle Regional Planning Commission for 2 years there. And then ended up at the city of Amarillo and just continually just been building up on my knowledge. And
What was the initial job you were hired for with the city then? Was it the job you have now?
Yeah. The city of Amarillo, there was an opening as a neighborhood planner. And so I just put in for that and interviewed and got the job.
And so, I want to hear about that, because a neighborhood planner is such a broad sort of idea of a job. I wonder if it was fully formed, when it was open to you, or if you knew what you were getting into, or if it just kind of becomes a lot of the things that you're good at, that you're interested in, and what begins to happen with the neighborhoods. I know there's been so much activity with the Barrio, with North Heights, with San Jacinto, and some of those neighborhood plans. And so has that job evolved since you got it?
Oh, most definitely. As you said, a neighborhood planner is not well defined, actually. And that's not just in Amarillo, that's kind of a national thing. It changes in description based on the community or whatever. And here in Amarillo, it has evolved person to person. And the efficiency of it evolves person to person. And I don't want to be facetious in any way, but I do know that the neighborhood planning in Amarillo under my leadership in the position is completely revolutionized. We have a lot more projects rolling out, a lot more expectations. I respond more to the neighborhoods. That's something I'm proud of from a relationship that I've built up, because whenever the neighborhood planning job was explained to me, it was something that on paper looks good. You work with the community, you get to do all these things. And that's what I really wanted whenever I came into this job, is I wanted to feel like I was doing more of an impact in the community, something that I felt I would make physical direct changes that either mattered to me or communities that I care about, know about. And so the thing also about it being ill-defined is there's no clear roadmap on how to get things executed. And so some of my prior work experience, from knowing about grant writing, contracts, procurement, how to manage a project, that's where those became extremely essential strengths. Because the thing about my position that's a lot different than other positions at the city is that I don't have like a department budget. I'm not my own department, but I have entire funding and allocations that I have to get projects not only administered. I have to go out and find the vendors. I have to work with the neighborhoods to get those set up. And then I have to, once we get everything contracted, I got to manage those projects.
Right.
I got to make sure the invoices get taken care of as they come in. I have to make sure on site things are getting taken care of. So it's a lot more involved, and it's completely different from any of the other planners at the City of Amarillo who do amazing work. In city terms, everyone else would be mostly considered a current planner, which, is plats and easements, annexations, the real like map work, work,
engineering types of things.
Yes, and then I'm more of the long range. I'm considered a long range planner because a lot of these are big projects. And even if they're considered short term projects, what leads up to it is a lot of work that it's not the same as doing a submittal and giving the approval.
For listeners who hear you say that there's a lot of long range elements to it, give people an idea of some of the projects you've been behind, or that have fallen, come across your desk that maybe we have seen some movement in. We've seen some success, maybe not final, but like stuff is happening.
I'll start with probably the most well-known ones and then work my way to some obscure things that are going to come on the way. So, for example, Creative Crosswalks in the city is one of the biggest projects that have come out of neighborhood planning recently. And it's one of my better successes in turnaround. And what I mean by turnaround is at some point, the San Jacinto neighborhood, it was their idea to put Creative Crosswalks in their neighborhood.
Right.
And it was a 3-year process for them. It was a process that began way before I had got there. But I got that trimmed down into there was so much work already put into it that within my first year of working at the city, I was able to help deliver the Creative Crosswalks. But then that very same year, North Heights wanted Creative Crosswalks. I took a 3-year process and knocked it down to a year. So North Heights, whenever the start of the project was suggested, they got their 6 crosswalks within a year.
Right.
APD, because they kind of threw theirs in at the last minute right when we were bidding, they got theirs within a few months of whenever North Heights was actually working on theirs. Now, there's some reasons for that. With the neighborhoods, they're a lot more creative. They get the public involved, and they have to spend time getting the design. San Jacinto had kids create their creative crosswalks, so that took a lot longer before we had to get the actual design before we could even set out to bid.
And those both the APD and the North Heights one both were installed this summer, so those are relatively new. And I feel like people should know it's not just a matter of getting a design and painting it on the road. Like there's got to be a lot of testing.
Oh man,
road construction gets involved. There's all these other elements to it.
there is a lot to it.
What kind of paint will work best on this sort of surface?
And that's why I say the turnaround matters a lot. The reason why I can say it was harder for some other neighborhood planners to support me and why it was a 3-year process is because there's not a lot of people that do creative crosswalks to begin with. The company, Creative Paving Solutions, that did in the city of Amarillo, they're from Arizona.
Okay.
They're not even
there
from
wasn't
the state
a local
of Texas.
vendor.
Yeah, there's not a local vendor. There's you have to find out the materials that can be used. There's street bond, thermoplast. You have to make sure the quality of the asphalt at each location is good. If not, can you get the traffic department to do it? They need a year notice in advance, so they're not a viable option all the time. Does the neighborhood have the funding themselves to redo the asphalt and do this art project on top of it? These are durable projects that are, depending on the material, they last for 10 years or 5 years. The budget depends on what material, what design you're going to do, what location. If existing infrastructure is a very issue, and I don't mean just the asphalt, because you have to be ADA compliant. Yeah, there could be an existing crosswalk back when they laid it in the 1940s.
Yeah.
But there's no ramps there.
Right.
And if you redo a crosswalk, it has to be ADA accessible. So now we got to figure in, how are we going to rebuild? Do we have the budget to build ramps and connecting sidewalk, hopefully in the future, to go to those ramps at that intersection? So it takes a lot of planning, making sure you're within the federal guidelines of doing the postings right. It is a lot of work, but it is so rewarding when the community gets something that they asked for and they want it.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. I think in city government, I will say as a whole, I believe people become apathetic at times, whether it be that they're disheartened by how long things take, even from their position as a city worker. I do a lot of hard work coordinating, not just with the neighborhoods and what people want and what I can actually do within my job, but also interdepartmentally, working with other departments that I have to coordinate with. I'm like, hey, I'm not an engineer, so engineering, you have to get these plans to me. And
Yeah.
I'm not in traffic. I know we have to have the 10-inch stripes on each side of the crosswalk, but I need your help telling me what else I need to do. And they help me. They do help me. It's not easy, and sometimes they probably get annoyed with me because I'm very proactive more than most people. But no matter what, they still get to me whenever I pressure them to help me really bring these projects to life.
Okay.
And then when it's done, just universally, if not just within the neighborhoods, but even when other departments can see the work that we're able to get done, they're very proud and they're excited if they took part of that.
Yeah. So the creative crosswalks is pretty visible. People can see that. You drive out and see those today. But what are some other projects that maybe are less in your face and maybe not quite as sexy as those?
Yes. So we're going to be taking pictures here soon. But for North Heights, for example, water is of a main concern within the North Heights plan boundary. There's plans for that, and things are going to happen with that eventually. But one thing that the North Heights Advisory Association has done is, and really the residents of North Heights have made very vocal, is that the fire hydrants are a main issue. Pressure ratings, everything is problematic within the North Heights.
There's infrastructure problems dating back decades and decades into the North Heights.
If we
From
let
the
it go
beginning,
on,
maybe?
Yeah, from the very beginning, honestly. And so with the spearhead of North Heights and me listening to what my neighborhoods tell me, I've drawn up the maps. I've worked with water utilities to have them go and repair existing hydrants and fixing those pressure flows. But also North Heights themselves have also funded to install 2 new fire hydrants to increase the coverage in North Heights. So there were like gaps in coverage, and they installed to help 2 new hydrants. And we have a map of that that's publicly available. And pretty soon, once we get the pictures of the new hydrants and the board by it, we'll probably push that out again and make sure it's more visible in public so people see some of those improvements. We have plans. It's not installed just yet, but in North Heights, we're putting up a street light on Hughes and Northwest 15th, right there by the Black Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
And we want to install 20 new street lights within North Heights. But we're starting with the one, and we're going to show it to people to see how they like it, because these aren't just going to be on main corridors. That one is, but the other 19 are going to be mid-block lighting.
Okay.
And that's going to do 2 things. One, it's going to brighten up streetways at night, which is for a pedestrian caution, but also on the thoughts of making streets safer at night as a crime deterrent. And I guess the third objective, and I guess the original objective, is for certain times in the year, we're coming up on that time of the year where it's dark early in the morning and kids are walking to school. And especially where there's not always sidewalk infrastructure, kids are walking to school and want it to be lit up and people to see.
And that's one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because I feel like you're probably more equipped than anybody to talk about it, that a lot of the activity in neighborhoods like the North Heights is the North Heights taking steps to catch up with other neighborhoods because there have been so many years of neglect. I mean, the fact that you're having to add enough fire hydrants to keep it, from having gaps in the service, you're having to add mid-block street lighting. There's mid-block street lighting in the neighborhood where I live. There are plenty of fire hydrants. And so it was a neighborhood that for a long time, because of racism, because of poverty, because of all kinds of socioeconomic factors, it just didn't get the attention that other neighborhoods got. I remember somebody telling me that when they started developing parts of Southwest Amarillo, like Windsor neighborhood, they were paving the alleys when the streets in the North Heights were still dirt. And so that tells you a lot about where the city was focusing its resources for a long, long time. And I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so the historically underserved populations, North Heights, San Jacinto, Eastridge, and the Barrio, which is especially why those are the 4 neighborhood plan boundaries, historic boundaries that I work with and preside over, maybe the best way to place it.
Those are your job description, right?
Yeah. And that is pinnacle to the work that I do, is kind of restoring some of those injustices. So in 2016, the city takes out a bond specifically to get funding for those neighborhoods to improve the infrastructure in each of those plan boundaries. And it's trying to make amends for all those years of neglect. Right now, it's just a catch-up, unfortunately. But we're continuing funding and to continue funding the neighborhoods in the future years, because as we get these improvements and eventually hopefully catch up, it doesn't just stop there. It's something that's got to continue on,
right,
and build on upon that. Right now we're playing catch up, so that's another reason why even some of the visible projects, they're impactful for areas that don't usually get things, but they're not impactful to people who know as a whole the other things that happen in the city, the other investments, the other major projects that can take place. And so it means a lot to me working hard on it. It means a lot to the neighborhoods to finally get something that they desire. But on the same time, even within the neighborhoods, the residents know that this isn't enough. And that's also the message that I drive. No matter how much we do, I can always do more. And I always let each of the neighborhood presidents, board members, general members, person who may not even be affiliated with the recognized neighborhood association, whatever it is that I could do to improve on my end, we're going to work and we're going to talk and we're going to have that conversation. I'm very approachable by anyone whenever it comes time to talk about policies or projects or anything that we can try and do to make movement within the neighborhood. Because I'm big on action. I'm very big on trying to do something.
Yeah. Well, and that's a valid point, that doing something, catching up, is great, but that doesn't still mean there's equality in the neighborhoods. You know, what the quality of life that's available in the North Heights or in Eastridge is still not the same as what it might be in other parts of the city. And so you can't just catch up and then think, oh, problem solved, we're fine, because there are continuing additions to all other neighborhoods. And so you've got to make sure that that continues going forward.
Yeah, and I am always in the rooms whenever it comes to funding in the neighborhood program. For one, I have to deliver projects to show that the neighborhoods aren't just being stagnant, because prior to my coming to the city of Amarillo, there was a risk that that funding would just be obligated to something else. There wasn't enough movement. And I think that's why a lot of the neighborhoods catch a lot of flack, especially in this position. When you're waiting on a project for 3 years, like the Creative Crossroads, you lose confidence that it's ever going to happen. Projects that were talked about 6 years ago, far before I was ever at the city, you lose confidence in the ability of the neighborhood planner whoever it is or whatever revolving door at that time. But as a neighborhood association or as a community looking back at the city, definitely loses confidence in the city that anything will get done. And so my job also as part of delivering for the neighborhoods is restoring their confidence in us to actually get something done. And my other job, and something that I cherish morally to me, is also speaking on behalf of this is what the neighborhoods want. This is what they're doing. This is what they're capable of. And we need this continued funding because we have to do more.
Yeah.
We're just playing catch up. I have a firm belief that whenever it comes to remedying wrongs historically, and this can be in any scenario of any politic, of any community, I am a firm believer that whatever effort you took to oppress someone, you have to put twice as much effort into liberating them. Whatever system controls, whatever defunding or not funding at all that you did for years, you got to do double the amount of that in order to remedy that issue. So if you took out one, you got to put in three.
Right.
Because, I mean, it's almost like a compounding interest of detriment that you have to make up. And so that's just my firm philosophy, is that I don't let it get off the hook with smaller takes to a bigger issue.
Okay.
I guess is the best way I could say that.
I was just thinking, we're recording this right after the Olympics, and it's like allowing, 9 of the sprinters to start the race and holding one sprinter back. Mm-hmm. It's not enough to just finally tell that person they can start running. They have to run faster or farther in order to catch those who have the head start. Mm-hmm. So it's not enough to just let them catch up because they're starting at such a disadvantage.
Such a disadvantage. And especially this is getting more into the modernization, and as we advance as society, is just you're playing catch up. But the thing is that technologies, requirements, and a lot of things have changed. Let's take a look at North Heights and the water situation or scenario. For one, everything post-COVID is more expensive. Sure. That's the biggest thing. And so if you wait enough on projects, and I've seen this happen on multiple projects where even if it's on the side of the neighborhood organization where they're not sure they want to do a project, the quote you got 5 years ago doesn't mean nothing today. And the more you wait to remedy that wrong, the more it's going to cost you in the end. And so it takes a lot to catch up, and it takes a lot to remedy your wrong, but that's a cost you have to eat as a public servant. Because if you're here to serve, and if you're in a firm belief of due diligence that you're wanting to do what's right as a public servant, then the cost isn't as much as a big of a problem because the people have already been suffering under that cost. Yes. They've already been paying the price. And that's just something I'd remind myself, but want many others to remember.
So to wrap this up, you're in a position where you're not only working on behalf of the city, you're working with people who live in the various neighborhoods. And so you've got your foot in both worlds. And I wonder, just in the few years you've been on this job, like what you've learned about Amarillo people, whether it's the people in government or the people who are asking the government for help. What does it tell you about this area?
I think the main thing that I find out from people is that the mistrust in government, and there's things about it that's unfounded. I feel like it's more of like a cultural war thing, bringing like national identity versus what's germane to local needs. And then I would say some of it is founded with how, like I said, not delivering on promises to the public. So whenever it comes to, let's say, me engaging with any of the neighborhoods, even if they have full confidence on me, especially now that I've been able to deliver projects and things for them, there are still times that whenever they come to me with a project and I'm like, well, I have to look into it, you can see they're kind of like, well,
yeah,
we'll see. Like,
I'll hear from you in 2 years.
Yeah, I'll hear from you in 2 years, or we're not sure if this is going to work. And that relationship has gotten better because it's not just that. Even if I can't deliver for a neighborhood on something that they want, it's the fact that I'll be the one to strike up the conversation about that topic, about that issue, or about whatever it is we're trying to do. I am there and present. I think it is more problematic that trying to hide from the ability not to do something than just owning up to that, but trying to find out what you can do, or what capacity can you create these sidewalks or do whatever. That's another thing. Circling back to some projects in San Jacinto, there's the sidewalks that were laid out. That was highly successful. The barrio is going to get their Southeast 10th Streetscape fairly soon. San Jacinto hasn't announced it, but I can now speak on it. They've got a community center that they've purchased. And with that community center, they are planning to do a lot between continuing to feed elders, continuing to be a distribution center for the food bank. It's the former Axe Community Center building. They have that building now. And they're going to be running classes, renter courses, and a lot of other programs. There's some investments that I can't announce yet because they're not to mess with the investors of what they plan to do at that facility. But as far as them owning the Axe Community Center, that's something that the San Jacinto Neighborhood Association has been able to achieve. And they're going to do wonderful things. We get these sort of small successes. And on the dealing with the culture of Amarillo, even whenever you achieve something, there's still this hold of success or progress is just too hard to depend on. And unfortunately, I think that people will become quicker to criticize anything positive even because it doesn't go to the full extent. And I think people just have to realize that and especially in this area, I'm someone on the mic, I'll identify myself as I'm someone very progressive. I'm very big into public infrastructure, public projects, because I believe in those physical investments that do the most for the community and bringing us together as a community, ultimately benefit our needs. No matter in what capacity, a public investment will return its value to me. And even if it doesn't directly benefit me, if it's helping my neighbor in some capacity, that's something that I can cherish as a community. That's not as widely accepted just yet. And then on the government side of things, for me, working with other departments, like I said, I'm very ambitious. And so sometimes I'm emailing, it starts off with, in between weeks, then it gets down to each week, and then it's each day, just nailing it down, hammering the point for I need something on this. I need you to give me something on this. And that was partially what I referenced earlier in the meetings, maybe a part of apathy, or they just don't see the vision, because I'll get congratulated once the crosswalks are done and they look bright and, it makes the city look good. It's cool. And people that were part of the process that may have not saw the vision at first, they see it and they're like, oh, this is amazing. And they want to be more a part of it. But until you see that success, it's very hard to believe in it. And that is the defining link between both the public and the city side, is that it's really hard to get behind these ideas until you actually see some progress. But once you get that progress, then it's rolling.
This episode of Hey Amarillo is supported by StoryBridge, an early childhood literacy program. In Amarillo, Potter and Randall counties, less than half of the children entering kindergarten are ready to learn to read. Now, we just had the start of a new school year, and imagine those kindergarten students if less than half of them aren't ready to learn to read. So this educational deficit at age 5, it negatively affects a child's performance all the way up until the time they graduate. 2 years ago, StoryBridge launched the Dolly Parton Imagination Library program to address this problem. Thanks to generous local donors, more than 8,000 children under the age of 5 now are registered to receive a new age-appropriate book in the mail every month at no cost to them or their families. In fact, StoryBridge just expanded into Armstrong County too, here in the Panhandle, and is working to make their program bigger to reach more than 10,000 area children. So you can give, you can get involved, you can make a donation. Go visit storybridgeama.org. That's storybridgeama.org. Okay, I'm back with Chris Jackson. Chris, this is the part of the show I call 8 Straight. 8 Straight is sponsored every week by Panhandle Plains Historical Museum and Canyon. It's the largest history museum in Texas, and its collection includes a scale model of the large Antelope Creek ruin, which was probably the first, quote, city in the Panhandle. And I used air quotes on that. You can't see it. But that site is located 50 miles northeast of Amarillo, and this village was occupied until around 1450. So long before there was much in the way of civilization here, that was there. So you can see that and learn more at panhandleplains.org.
It's very funny because the Panhandle Plains Museum, for one, don't park there. They make it very clear. Do not park around there on the campus.
Park at the appropriate places, and it's even harder now with construction on campus.
Yes, there's a street, like a main street, that I would always park on. And I had a very identifiable car back in college. I would always park right on that main street, and then every day to class, I would just cut like right through the museum at times, and I would just see all those little cool things just about every day trying to make my way to class. But it's funny that I mentioned Panhandle Plains Museum.
There's a lot of little things to see if you're passing through or if you're spending time there. Okay, first question. When you think of Amarillo 10 years from now, and I know that you think in this direction, what do you hope for?
More public infrastructure. I hope there's more crosswalks, not just the creative ones. I hope there's more sidewalks. We're working towards that.
Lights.
I really want, and this is kind of the thing I get criticism for, is like, why don't we get crosswalks and we don't even have trains? Or I would really love a metro.
Yeah.
I kind of have like this weird scaled system. Downtown, I would like a slow trolley so you could see some of the smaller spots around downtown to slowly move through downtown.
Which we used to have
atmosphere.
100 years ago.
Yes.
The trolley system.
We should bring that back. And then on the outer rim of it, I think we should have the metro. That's a little bit more complex and gets areas a little bit quicker. I believe the metro should go between here and Canyon even, especially for the educational purposes, because at some point we will grow to that metro. In 10 years, definitely that more metro as we grow in the distribution of the population kind of gets closer to each other between Canyon and Amarillo. And then I would want a train from like here to Dallas and goes to Austin or wherever. Like I really want that infrastructure invested in the Panhandle. Politics be damned. This place is too big, way too big for us not to have comprehensive public infrastructure. And I tell people this all the time. What is the first thing they ask you on a job interview? Do you have reliable transportation? That is the first question. And so besides the things that it could do economically and just traversing the city and being a part of the city, I'm thinking about the job growth, the amount of people the more opportunities that become available to the residents when they can move around their city. And public transportation is just cost efficient. And y'all can blame my DC experience for that. It was amazing hitting the metro, not buying gas all the time.
Hey, I just got back from Europe. We traveled all over, didn't have a car, didn't have anything. It was just all public transportation.
Yeah, I spent like $100, and for like a month, I can go anywhere I needed. Interstate travel. Yeah. I could go to different states on that metro. It hit certain stops that went. It was amazing. So in 10 years, I see us definitely growing towards Canyon, and I hope our infrastructure grows towards that.
I love that vision. I full cosign to that. Okay, other than wind, what does this area have too much of?
This might be a controversial take, but Tootin' Totems.
Okay. Well, they're not currently a sponsor, so it's okay.
I don't want to mess with your sponsors. But maybe I should say maybe convenience stores. I think. Don't get me wrong. Love Tootin' Totem. I go there often. There's one very close to my neighborhood that I hit up. But there's certain investment properties I look at, and I was like, well, we could have not just a Tootin' Totem, but no gas station could have been right here. This could have been something a lot more cool. A public space, anything. Even out of a public space, I just wish some type of investor could bring something new along this strip or something. And so I see there's a lot of things that get replicated within the city of Amarillo. And I think, and this may have to do with infrastructure, it's getting replicated because it takes too long to get to the other side of town to really engage or have that experience or to do X, Y, and Z.
Well, the fact that we are a car-based culture and not a public transportation culture leads directly to all these, gas stations on every corner.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be in need if we didn't have to jump in our cars every time we want to go someplace.
Exactly. I get it. And I mean, I understand people's freedom and love for a car, but ultimately the benefits of not needing that and just having walkable communities, I think that's something that's more important. Yeah, just we have way too many convenience store, way too much car-based issues.
Yeah. Okay, what does this area not have enough of?
I don't want to say appreciation for arts and things like that because there's plenty of that in Amarillo. But there's something missing to it in Amarillo, and I think that's accessibility. And I'm not saying there's any art community that closes anyone off. Historically, Amarillo is the most welcoming community that we have. I think that I don't know if our art or what makes us unique is celebrated enough. Now, I think a lot of that will change with the centennial coming up, Route 66. But I think that may also have to do with how easily you can get to those places and meet with people. And so I think what we don't have enough of is spaces where we can come together. I think that we kind of lack some togetherness. And that is partially in a post-COVID era, because I'm not going to lie, I've gotten very used to not having to leave my house.
Yeah.
I love that. As social as I can be and as outward going as I can be, there are times when that seclusion just hits just right, and I don't want to leave that. But I think that also has to do with infrastructure. When people are like, no one uses sidewalks, we don't have any sidewalks.
Yeah.
Where do you want people to walk? In the streets. Where do you want people to meet? There's not too many places to go. Like, yeah, the coffee shop is nice. You have your coffee shop that you like to go to. You have certain bars and things like that. You have the park that you like, but even our parks need improvements to be more accommodating to people. Our public spaces need a lot of attention, and we just don't have enough places where we can go and be with each other in general.
What's your favorite street in Amarillo? Or will you get in trouble for answering that?
Yeah. I don't know if I could possibly pick out a street in each neighborhood plan boundary, but I think my favorite street in Amarillo, I know which one's going to become my favorite street with some of the projects we have. Northwest 18th, and you can document it, will become and is becoming my favorite street just because we have a major sidewalk project from Hughes all the way to Bonham that we're going to complete all the sidewalk gaps there. We already have the ECA Carver Creative Crosswalk right there at that school. We're going to place streetlights there eventually. That will become my favorite street. Currently, I would have to say Pecan Street that I grew up on as a kid in Hamlet.
Yeah.
My favorite street. One of the facts about Pecan Street, even though it's kind of died out now, is that there was pecan trees all up and down the street. And as a kid, I remember I'm not sure if I was supposed to, but I was just grabbing pecans off people's trees. And all the kids did. I
have a pecan tree in my backyard. I would be thrilled if somebody grabbed those pecans and took them. So
yes, because there's so many. I don't think people really realize that. I think that maybe that was another cultural thing for us on our block. They would just be like, they would like almost fall all over the ground. They were just everywhere. And so we would just be eating pecans and chilling outside all summer long. And that's one of the memories that are dear to me. So that's why that street always has a place in my heart.
What's your favorite local restaurant or food truck?
Favorite restaurant? Shile's. I love Shile's. My cousin put me on with Shile's one day. And I know a few of the other different black restaurants, like there's Delvin's, there's North Heights Discount, but Shile's, no matter what I get there, I always make sure to get a double order of dirty red beans and rice.
Yep.
Love Shile's. And now they have a food truck, so they might become my next favorite food truck. Actually.
We had Tremaine's food truck out at our recent event at the park, and there was a long line of people there. So people know word is out. I'm glad he's got a food truck now.
Yeah.
What's the most underrated aspect of living in Amarillo?
There's a few things I would want to say, but I think underrated is some of the costs of living. I think that discussion changes when we mix in public infrastructure and some things that are available. Because I could see why it may be expensive in more other categories that matter.
The low tax rate is something people are pretty passionate about.
Yeah, the low tax
rate.
That
has to do with the cost of living, the low cost of living, but not necessarily the quality of life.
The quality of life. And so it's that really there's an imbalance here. I will say that there's an imbalance here when it comes to that, and that I don't like. But there is a nice cost of living. I think there is a friendliness once we can step aside and step out of certain identities that we have. There's a friendliness to Amarillo that I love and appreciate, and I think that's something that you don't really get. And I guess that Southern hospitality, that's just not something that exists everywhere, but it can be replicated.
Yeah. What's your favorite local nonprofit?
Favorite local nonprofit? Do I just need to shout out all my neighborhood associations?
Let's take all the neighborhood associations off the table.
Yeah, off the table. Love those guys, and they are doing good work. I do want to say that, but I would have to say Amarillo Area Foundation. I feel like that's an easy one, but my reason for saying that is that I've known even before my work at the city that there's someone that people can go to for certain help to try and find grants, or even if they just need assistance or like legal aid.
Yeah.
There's just certain names or certain pillars within the community that I know can help with certain resources. And I appreciate that, because if I can't help, if it's something without my ability or my capacity, I love being able to turn over to, maybe you got to look at Amarillo Area Foundation to see what they might have in this, or legal aid may be able to help you structure this in some way that you can make this happen and become someone that people can help or something. I just know of the different work that they've been able to do. And maybe I would have to say there's a lot of nonprofits. I feel almost like there's a new one every day. At one point I was working, it wasn't a nonprofit, but I had a community organization at one point. And so there gets to be so many. So I would just shout out them as the number one.
They're kind of the backbone behind almost everything else.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And last question, when was the last time you visited the Big Texan?
Oh, God, that was actually like 2 years ago. It was about 2 years ago was the last time I went to the Big Texan. And what it was is my friend he's from San Antonio. And it was his first time ever coming to Amarillo. And of course.
Yeah. That's what you had to do then.
We got to go to the Big Texan. That's just tradition. Maybe that's something we don't have enough of. We need more people to come and just, I love being proud of stuff like that about Amarillo. Big Texan is a classic. If it's your first time here, that's where we're going.
Okay. So that concludes the 8 straight questions. I like to close by asking my guests to endorse something. So what's one thing you would like listeners to know about or to experience?
I would really like anyone who hears this interview, reads it, whatever they do, to get involved with the North Heights Advisory Association, the San Jacinto Neighborhood Advocates, the Eastridge Community Association, or the Barrio Neighborhood Planning Committee. I love those guys because they work so hard. They really are passionate about their communities. The passion that my neighborhood presidents have to see the neighborhoods grow and for people to get what they want. They're who I want to shout out in this moment, because I wouldn't have a job without them, for one, I guess, if we're going to put it that way.
Yeah.
But most importantly, I see their passion, and they really need more participation from people. They're very small. Just because they're working with the city doesn't mean they're these big organizations. Right. Sometimes it's just 4 people. Sometimes it's 10 on a good day. And so I want people to really look into the neighborhoods.
Okay. Chris Jackson, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
And that concludes the episode. I want to say thanks to Chris for the interview. And like he said, it's worth following and supporting the nonprofit neighborhood organizations that are so central to his work as a neighborhood planner. Thanks also to Storybridge, SKP Creative, and Panhandle Plains Historical Museum for supporting this podcast. And as always, thanks to Angelina Marie for editing the show. While you're at it, go visit AmarilloTribune.org and sign up there to get news alerts. Thank you for listening. Hey Amarillo exists on a weekly basis because of listeners like you and the local people who support it financially through patreon.com/HeyAmarillo. Hey Amarillo's executive producers include Patrick Burns, Jason Burr, Katie Linger, Josh Wood, Corey Burns, Wes Reeves, Cindy Graham, and Barbara and Jim Witten. This has been episode 366. My name is Jason Boyette, and I'll see you next week.